The warning siren screamed through Section 9 of Orbital Station Harmony 7, but Kang Hyun barely heard them over the sound of his own heartbeat. One moment he had been loading cargo containers onto the transport platform, and the next moment the entire world had turned into chaos and screaming metal. The station shook violently beneath his feet. Hyun grabbed onto a support railing as the floor tilted at a dangerous angle. Around him, dozens of beings from different species ran in every direction, their voices mixing into a terrifying chorus of panic. He saw Italian merchant stumble and fall, his forearms flailing as he tried to catch himself. A group of human traders pushed past Hyun, nearly knocking him over in their rush toward the emergency exits. Somewhere in the distance, metal groaned and tore. The sound made Hyun's stomach drop. He had worked on this station for 3 years, and he knew that sound meant something very bad was happening. The bulkheads were failing. Sections were sealing themselves off automatically, trying to contain whatever disaster had struck the station. Hyun forced himself to move. He needed to get to the emergency shelter. His legs felt heavy, like he was moving through water instead of air. The emergency lights cast everything in a hellish red glow. Sparks rained down from damaged ceiling panels, and somewhere nearby he could hear the hiss of escaping atmosphere. Then he saw her. A small figure stood frozen in the middle of the corridor, directly in the path of a massive support beam that was breaking free from the ceiling. The child was like nothing Hyun had ever seen before. Her skin seemed to be made of crystal, reflecting the red emergency lights in 1,000 different directions. Her large eyes were wide with terror, glowing with an inner light that pulsed rapidly like a frightened heartbeat. Time seemed to slow down. Hyun watched the beam begin its descent. He calculated the distance, the speed, the angle. The child would not survive. She was too small, too fragile, too afraid to move. His body moved before his brain finished thinking. Hyun ran toward the child, his boots pounding against the metal floor. He could hear people shouting behind him, telling him to stop, to save himself, but their voices seemed to come from very far away. The beam was falling faster now, groaning as it tore free from its moorings. Hyun reached the child and threw his arms around her small body. She felt warm and strangely smooth under his hands. He twisted as he fell, positioning his own body between her and the falling beam. For just a second he felt her crystalline fingers grip his jacket, surprisingly strong for someone so small. Then the beam hit him. The pain was beyond anything Hyun had ever imagined. It started in his back and exploded through his entire body like lightning. He felt something crack inside him, heard the sound of his own bones breaking. His vision went white, then black, then white again. He could not breathe. His lungs would not work. Every nerve in his body was screaming, but beneath him the child was alive. He could feel her moving, could hear her making small, frightened sounds. She was alive. That was all that mattered. Hyun tried to speak, to tell her it would be okay, but no words came out. His mouth tasted like copper. Blood, he realized distantly. He was bleeding internally, probably dying. The thought seemed strangely unimportant. The child was making different sounds now, high and musical. Was she calling for help? Hyun hoped someone would hear her. The weight of the beam was crushing him, making it impossible to draw a full breath. His body felt cold despite the pain. That was bad, he knew. That meant he was going into shock. Voices reached him through the fog of pain. Heavy footsteps, hands grabbing at the beam, trying to lift it. Hyun felt the pressure ease slightly and he gasped in a painful breath. The world came back into focus for a moment. He saw emergency workers in their orange suits surrounding him. He saw the child being lifted away from him, still reaching back toward him with her crystalline hands. More hands were on him now, carefully rolling him onto a stretcher. Everything hurt. Everything was fire and broken glass and wrongness. Someone was talking to him, telling him to stay awake, to keep breathing, but their voice sounded like it was underwater. The child broke free from whoever was holding her and ran back to him. Her small hands grabbed his arm and she pressed her forehead against his shoulder. The musical sounds she was making had changed. They sounded like crying. Hyun wanted to comfort her, to tell her he was fine, but the lie would not come. He was not fine. He could feel his body shutting down piece by piece. A new voice cut through the chaos. It was deeper than the child's voice, but had the same musical quality. An adult of the same species, Hyun realized. The woman appeared above him, her crystalline face twisted with emotion. She said something in her own language, rapid and urgent. Then she looked at Hyun and their eyes met. Her eyes were the same color as the child's, deep purple that seemed to hold entire galaxies. Hyun saw understanding pass between them. She knew what he had done. She knew he had traded his life for her daughter's. The woman reached out and touched his face with one crystalline hand. Her touch was cool and somehow soothing. She spoke again, but this time in the common language that most species used for trade. Her voice was thick with emotion. "You saved her. You saved my Aaliyah." Hyun tried to nod, but the movement sent fresh waves of agony through his broken body. His vision was darkening at the edges. He could feel himself slipping away, feel the world becoming distant and unimportant. The last thing he saw was the woman still touching his face, tears streaming down her crystalline cheeks. The last thing he heard was the child, Aaliyah, crying his name in her musical language. Then the darkness took him and Kang Hyun knew nothing more. Above his unconscious body, Thalara held her daughter close and made a vow in the ancient words of her people. This human had given everything to save Aaliyah. By the sacred laws of the Vallani, he was now bound to them forever. She would make sure he survived. She would make sure he was honored. She would make sure he never stood alone again. The human was hers now, whether he knew it or not. Hyun woke to the sound of soft breathing and the smell of something sweet he could not identify. His body felt strange, heavy, and light at the same time. For a long moment he kept his eyes closed and tried to remember where he was and what had happened. Pain. He remembered pain, a falling beam, a child with crystalline skin. His eyes opened slowly. The ceiling above him was white and clean, dotted with soft glowing panels that provided gentle light. This was the medical bay. He had been here once before when he broke his arm in a cargo accident. But something was different this time. The room seemed too quiet, too peaceful. Hyun turned his head carefully, expecting pain but feeling only a dull ache instead. Sitting in a chair next to his bed was the crystalline woman from his memories. She was even more beautiful in proper light. Her skin shifted colors as she breathed, flowing from pale blue to soft purple. Her eyes were closed and her head was tilted slightly to one side. She was sleeping. On the other side of his bed, curled up in a ball on a spare blanket, was the child, Aaliyah. She was also sleeping. One small hand stretched out toward Hyun as if trying to maintain contact even in sleep. Hyun tried to sit up, and the movement made the woman's eyes snap open. She was on her feet instantly, leaning over him with an expression of concern and something else he could not quite identify. "Do not move too quickly," she said in the common language. Her voice was like music played on crystal chimes. "Your injuries were severe. You have been unconscious for 3 days. 3 days. Hyun processed this information slowly. He looked down at his body and saw the medical wrappings covering his chest and back. He could feel bandages under the thin hospital gown. 3 days meant his injuries had been bad. Very bad. "The child," he said, his voice rough from disuse. "Is she okay?" The woman's expression softened and she glanced at the sleeping Aaliyah. "She is unharmed because of you. Not a single scratch. You shielded her completely." Hyun nodded and immediately regretted it as his head throbbed. "Good, that's good. Good?" The woman's voice rose slightly, waking Aaliyah. "You nearly died. The doctors said your spine was fractured, your ribs broken, internal bleeding. They said a human body should not have survived what you endured." Aaliyah sat up quickly, rubbing her eyes. When she saw Hyun was awake, she made a high musical sound of joy and scrambled onto the bed despite her mother's protests. She pressed her small forehead against Hyun's arm, making soft, trilling sounds. "She has not left your side," the woman said quietly. "None of my staff could convince her to leave. She insists you are her shield father now." "Shield father?" Hyun repeated the word carefully. The woman sat down again, her movements graceful and controlled. "I am Thalara of the Vallani Third House. This is my daughter Aaliyah. Among my people there is a sacred bond called Kareshvol. When someone saves a life at the cost of their own well-being, they become bound to that life forever. It is not a debt. It is a connection that cannot be broken." Hyun frowned. "I don't understand. I just did what anyone would do." "No." Thalara's voice was firm. "Most beings ran to save themselves. You ran toward danger to save a child who was not your own, not even your species. That is not what anyone would do. That is what a hero does." "I'm not a hero," Hyun said quickly. "I'm just a cargo worker. I load boxes onto ships. That's all." Thalara leaned forward and her eyes caught the light, making them glow. You are HFY now. By the laws of my people, you are bound to my bloodline. I am responsible for your health, your happiness, your future. You are mine to protect, mine to provide for, mine to honor. The word sent a chill down Hyun's spine. I can't accept that. I don't need anything. I'm fine. You are not fine. Thalara's voice was gentle but unyielding. The doctors say you will never work in cargo again. Your spine will heal, but not perfectly. You will have pain for the rest of your life. Your career is over. The words hit Hyun harder than the beam had. His job was all he had. It was how he survived, how he paid for his small quarters, how he ate. Without it, he had nothing. Thalara must have seen the despair on his face because her expression softened. That is why I am here. You saved my daughter. Now I will save you. I have arranged for Villani healers to treat you. Technology and methods we do not usually share with other species. You will heal properly. You will be whole again. I can't pay for that, Hyun said quietly. You already did. With your blood and your bones and your willingness to die. Thalara stood and gestured to someone outside the room. 2 staff members entered, carrying bags and containers. I have moved into your quarters. Elia and I will stay with you until you are recovered. What? Hyun tried to sit up fully, but Elia pushed him back down with surprising strength for such a small child. You can't do that. My place is tiny. It's just 1 room and a bathroom. There's barely space for me. Then we will be close, Thalara said simply. She began directing her staff to arrange items around the medical bay. When you are released, we will discuss more permanent arrangements. For now, rest. The Villani healers will arrive tomorrow to begin your treatment. Hyun wanted to argue, to refuse, to explain that this was all too much. But the words would not come. His body was exhausted and his mind was overwhelmed. Elia was still pressed against his side, making contented humming sounds. The warmth of her small body was oddly comforting. Why are you doing this? He finally asked. Thalara turned to look at him, and in her eyes he saw something ancient and powerful. Because you did not hesitate. Because you asked about my daughter before yourself. Because in a universe full of cruelty and selfishness you chose kindness. That is rare, Kang Hyun. Rarer than any crystal or precious metal. And among my people we protect rare things. She walked to the bed and placed one cool hand on his shoulder. You shielded Elia with your body. Now I will shield you with everything I have. That is HFY. That is the way of the Villani. You saved one of us, so you become one of us. Whether you accept it or not, the bond is formed. You are mine, Kang Hyun, and I take care of what is mine. Hyun looked into her glowing eyes and saw absolute certainty there. This woman would not be swayed. He did not understand her culture or her laws, but he understood determination when he saw it. I don't know how to be anyone's hero, he said softly. Thalara smiled, and it transformed her face into something warm and almost human. Then it is fortunate that I do not need a hero. I need only Hyun, the man who saw a child in danger and chose to act. That man is enough. Elia made another musical sound and Thalara laughed. She says you are her shield father now and she will not allow anyone to harm you. Even at 6 years old, my daughter is fierce. Despite everything, Hyun felt himself smile. The situation was impossible and overwhelming. But there was something comforting about the weight of Elia against his side and the protective stance of Thalara beside his bed. For the first time in his adult life, Kang Hyun was not alone. He closed his eyes and let himself accept, just for a moment, the strange gift he had been given. He had saved a life, and somehow in return his own life had been saved as well. 2 weeks passed, and Hyun learned that living with Villani was nothing like he had imagined. His tiny quarters had been transformed completely. Thalara had somehow expanded the space using portable walls and clever furniture that folded and unfolded as needed. What had been a simple room now felt like a small home. The Villani healers came every day. Their treatments were painful but effective. They used crystals that hummed with strange energy, pressing them against his injuries until Hyun thought he would scream. But each session left him stronger, more mobile. The doctors were amazed. His spine was healing faster than human medicine could explain. Elia followed him everywhere. She had decided that her shield father needed constant protection, which meant she sat outside the bathroom while he showered and held his hand while he ate. At first, Hyun found it uncomfortable, but gradually he grew used to her presence. She was a sweet child, always humming and trying to teach him words in her musical language. Thalara was different than he expected. She was a diplomat, important and powerful, but in their small quarters she was simply a mother trying to care for her daughter. She cooked strange Vellani meals that glowed slightly and tasted like nothing Hyun had ever experienced. She told him stories about her world, about crystal cities and singing mountains. In return, Hyun told her about Earth, about rain and oceans and trees. Things that seemed ordinary to him fascinated her. She had never felt rain. Her world was dry, all stone and crystal. The idea of water falling from the sky amazed her. "It must be beautiful," she said one evening as they sat together while Ilya slept. "Your world sounds full of life." "It is," Hyun admitted. "I haven't been back in 5 years. I miss it sometimes. Why did you leave?" Hyun was quiet for a moment. "No family, no ties. I wanted to see the stars. Turns out the stars are mostly empty space and cargo containers." Thalara laughed softly. "And yet you found us in all that empty space." Their conversations became longer each night. Hyun learned that Thalara had lost her bondmate in a war 3 years ago. She had raised Aliyah alone since then, using her diplomatic work to provide for them both. She admitted that she was tired, that the weight of being both mother and provider was heavy. Hyun understood that feeling. He had been alone for so long that he had forgotten what it felt like to have someone to talk to at the end of the day. But not everyone on the station was happy about their arrangement. Hyun started noticing the stairs when he went out for therapy walks. Other humans whispered and pointed. Some looked angry. Others looked envious. The alien species treated him differently now too, some with respect, others with suspicion. One day a Kreth warrior blocked his path in the corridor. The Kreth were massive beings covered in dark scales and built like living tanks. This one looked down at Hyun with obvious contempt. "You are the human who claims Vellani protection," the Kreth said, his voice deep and rumbling. "I didn't claim anything," Hyun replied carefully. Thalara offered help. "I accepted. You make your entire species look weak, hiding behind a female and a child. The Kreth would never accept such shame." Hyun felt anger rise in his chest, but he kept his voice calm. "I'm not hiding. I'm healing. There's a difference." The Kreth leaned closer and his breath smelled like sulfur. "My warlord Vexoran sees what you are doing. He sees how you poison the Vellani diplomat's mind with your weakness. This will not stand." Before Hyun could respond, the Kreth walked away, leaving him standing alone in the corridor with a cold knot of worry in his stomach. That night, he told Thalara about the encounter. Her face became hard, her eyes flashing with anger. "Vexoran," she said the name like a curse. "He has wanted an alliance with the Vellani for years. When I refused his offers, he became hostile. He sees you as a weakness he can exploit." "Maybe I should leave," Hyun said quietly. "I don't want to cause problems for you." Ilya, who had been pretending to sleep, sat up quickly and grabbed Hyun's arm. "No, Shieldfather stays." Thalara's expression softened as she looked at her daughter, then hardened again as she looked at Hyun. "You will not leave. Vexoran is a bully who understands only strength. Running would prove him right. We stand together, or we fall separately." Over the following days, Hyun noticed more Kreth on the station. They traveled in groups, watching him and Thalara with hostile eyes. Security increased around the diplomatic quarters. Thalara started carrying a weapon, a crystal blade that hung at her hip. "Is it really that serious?" Hyun asked one evening. "Vexoran is dangerous," Thalara said, checking the blade's edge. "He believes the Vellani should join the Kreth Dominion. He thinks our crystal technology combined with his military force would make an unstoppable empire. And you refused him. Many times. The Vellani value peace and knowledge. We will not become weapons for a warmonger." She looked at Hyun seriously. "But now he sees you as my weakness. A soft human who I protect instead of proper Kreth strength. He will try to use you against me." "Then let me help," Hyun said. "I'm not completely healed, but I'm not helpless either. Teach me to defend myself. Teach me about your culture, your politics. Let me be useful." Thalara studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled. "You already are useful, Kang Hyun. You give Elia someone to trust. You give me someone to talk to. But yes, I will teach you. If Vexoran comes, you should be ready." The lessons began the next day. Thalara taught him basic Vellani combat, movements that focused on balance and precision rather than strength. She taught him about the political landscape of the station, who could be trusted and who could not. She taught him her language, the musical words that Aaliyah had been trying to teach him all along. Hyun was a quick learner. His body was still healing, but his mind was sharp. He absorbed everything Thalara taught him, asking questions and practicing until his muscles ached. 3 weeks after the Kreth's warning, Hyun went for his evening therapy walk. The station was quieter than usual. Too quiet. The normal crowds of traders and travelers were absent. Warning signs appeared in his mind, little details that did not fit. He changed his route, heading away from the main corridors toward the maintenance areas. That was when he saw them. 2 Kreth warriors working near the power core access panel. They moved quickly and quietly, clearly doing something they should not be doing. Hyun's heart began to race. He activated his communicator to call security, but before he could speak, one of the Kreth turned and saw him. Their eyes met across the corridor. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the Kreth warriors ran toward him, and Hyun knew that whatever they had been doing, it was very bad. He turned and ran, his healing body protesting with every step. Behind him, he could hear the heavy footsteps of the Kreth getting closer. He managed to trigger a silent alarm on his communicator before a massive hand grabbed his shoulder and slammed him against the wall. Pain exploded through his barely healed spine. The world spun, and Hyun found himself looking up at 2 very angry Kreth warriors. "The human saw us," one said in their harsh language. "Then the human dies," the other replied. But the first Kreth paused, a cruel smile spreading across his scaled face. "No, we take him. When the bomb goes off, the Vellani diplomat will be too distracted saving her pet human to save herself." Perfect. Bomb. The word echoed in Hyun's mind as rough hands dragged him deeper into the maintenance corridors. They had planted a bomb. Thalara was in danger. Elia was in danger. He struggled, but the Kreth were too strong. One of them hit him hard across the face, and everything went dark. Hyun woke to the sound of angry voices and the smell of burning electronics. His head throbbed where the Kreth had hit him, and his hands were bound behind his back with some kind of metal restraint. He kept his eyes closed and listened, trying to understand what was happening. The alarm was silent, one Kreth was saying. "Security does not know we are here yet. We have time to finish the setup. What about the human?" Another voice asked. "We keep him. When the Vellani diplomat comes looking, we use him to buy time. Then the bomb goes off and both problems are solved." Hyun's mind raced. The silent alarm had worked. Security would be coming, but how long would it take them to find this location? And more importantly, how long until the bomb went off? He opened his eyes carefully. He was in a storage room near the power core, surrounded by humming machinery and thick cables. 3 Kreth warriors stood around a device that looked like nothing Hyun had seen before. It had to be the bomb. Wires connected it to the power core's main feed. When it exploded, it would take out the core and probably a large section of the station. Thalara would be in the diplomatic quarters for the evening gathering. Elia would be with her. They would both die if the bomb went off. Hyun tested the restraints on his wrists. They were tight but not impossible. The Kreth had assumed a human could not break them. They were probably right, but Hyun had to try anyway. He worked his wrists slowly, ignoring the pain as the metal cut into his skin. Minutes passed. The Kreth continued working on the bomb, arguing about timing and placement. Hyun kept working on the restraints, feeling warm blood trickle down his hands. The metal was loosening just slightly. Not enough, then he heard it. A sound like crystal chimes singing in harmony. Thalara's voice calling his name from somewhere in the corridors outside. The Kreth heard it too. They grabbed their weapons, massive energy rifles that could cut through steel. One of them yanked Hyun to his feet and pressed a blade against his throat. "Time to use our leverage," the Kreth growled. The door to the storage room slid open, and Thalara stood there. But she was not the gentle diplomat Hyun had been living with. This was Thalara the warrior. She wore armor made of overlapping crystal plates that caught the light and threw it back in blinding patterns. In each hand she held a crystal blade that hummed with deadly energy. Behind her, Hyun could see Elia's small face peeking around the corner, her eyes wide with fear. "Let him go," Thalara said, her voice cold and hard. The Kreth holding Hyun laughed. "You are outnumbered, diplomat. 3 warriors against 1 female. Even for Vellani, those are bad odds." "Then let me improve them," a new voice said. Station security poured into the corridor behind Thalara, their weapons raised. But the Kreth at the bomb laughed. "You cannot shoot in here. 1 stray blast hits the bomb or the power core and we all die." The human dies. Everyone dies. Thalara's eyes met Hyun's across the room. He saw her calculation, saw her trying to find a way to save everyone, but there was no good solution. The standoff was perfect. Nobody could move without triggering disaster. That was when Hyun made his decision. He had been working the restraints throughout the entire confrontation. Now, with one final twist that sent agony shooting through his wrists, the metal band snapped open. Moving faster than the Kreth expected, Hyun drove his elbow backward into the warrior's stomach, then dropped and rolled away from the blade. The Kreth roared in anger and raised his rifle, but Thalara was already moving. She crossed the distance in a blur of crystal armor and singing blades. Her first strike disarmed the Kreth. Her second struck him across the chest, sending him crashing into the wall. The other two Kreth attacked. The storage room became a whirlwind of combat. Thalara moved like water and struck like lightning, her blades flashing faster than Hyun's eyes could follow. But she was still outnumbered, and the Kreth were strong. Station security tried to enter, but the fighting was too intense. One wrong shot could hit the bomb or the power core. They were forced to wait at the doorway, weapons ready but useless. Hyun scrambled toward the bomb. He did not know how to disarm it. He was a cargo worker, not an engineer. But he knew cargo containers. He knew shielding. And he knew the station's layout. His fingers flew over his communicator. Security, I need a cargo pod opened at Bay 17. Emergency override now. What are you doing? One of the security officers shouted. Hyun did not answer. He was already disconnecting the bomb from the power core's feed. The device was heavy, much heavier than it looked. His healing body protested as he lifted it, but he did not stop. He could not stop. Behind him, Thalara fought with everything she had. One Kreth was down. Another was injured, but the third had her cornered, his massive fists hammering at her crystal armor. Cracks were forming in the plates. Hyun, no! Thalara screamed as she realized what he was doing. But Hyun was already running. He carried the bomb through the corridor, his feet pounding against the metal floor. Security personnel scrambled out of his way. Elia cried out as he passed, reaching for him with her small hands. Shield, father! Hyun did not look back. Could not look back. The bomb's timer display showed 1 minute and 30 seconds. Not enough time to get it off the station, but maybe enough time to contain it. He reached Cargo Bay 17. The cargo pod sat open, its thick walls designed to withstand explosive decompression and survive in the vacuum of space. It was not designed to contain a bomb, but it was the best chance they had. Hyun threw the bomb inside and slammed the pod door closed. His fingers danced across the control panel, initiating the launch sequence. The pod had an emergency escape unit, a small protected core designed to save anyone trapped inside during an accident. If he could activate it at the right moment, maybe he could survive. 30 seconds. Hyun climbed into the pod. Through the small viewport, he saw Thalara running toward him. Her crystal armor cracked and bloody. Elia was behind her, stumbling as she tried to keep up. 20 seconds, get everyone back. Hyun shouted through the communicator. Clear the bay. Thalara reached the pod door. She grabbed the external controls, trying to override the launch sequence. Her fingers moved in a blur, entering diplomatic override codes. 10 seconds, you cannot do this again. Thalara screamed at him through the viewport. I will not lose you. Better me than everyone, Hyun said quietly. He pressed his hand against the viewport, and after a moment, Thalara pressed hers against it from the other side. Crystal and flesh, separated by transparent metal. 5 seconds. Thalara's fingers flew across the controls one final time. Something deep in the pod systems engaged with a heavy thunk. The emergency escape unit, she had activated it remotely. Live, Thalara commanded, tears streaming down her face. That is an order. 3 seconds, the pod launched, explosive bolts firing it out into space. Hyun was thrown back against the wall as acceleration hit him like a hammer. Through the viewport, he saw the station rapidly shrinking. 1 second. Hyun curled into the emergency escape unit, a small armored sphere in the center of the pod. The door sealed around him automatically. He barely fit inside, his healing body pressed tight against the curved walls. 0. The universe turned white. The explosion ripped through the cargo pod, tearing it apart like paper. Metal screamed and broke. Fire bloomed in the airless void. The shockwave sent the emergency unit spinning end over end, tumbling through space like a coin flip that would decide whether Hyun lived or died. Inside the tiny sphere, Hyun closed his eyes and thought of crystalline skin and musical laughter. He thought of a woman who had chosen to protect him. He thought of a child who called him Shield Father, and he hoped he had given them enough time to live. The emergency unit's beacon activated, a tiny light crying out in the vast darkness. Ships would come. They would search. The question was whether they would find him before his air ran out, or the cold claimed him. Kang Hyun, cargo worker and accidental hero, floated in the black between stars and waited to see if his sacrifice had been enough. The recovery ships found Hyun's emergency unit 3 hours later, floating in the debris field where the cargo pod had exploded. The tiny sphere was scorched and dented but intact. Inside, Hyun was unconscious but alive, his body temperature dangerously low but his heart still beating. They rushed him back to the station's medical bay, where a team of human and Vellani doctors worked together to save his life for the second time. Thalara never left the observation window. She stood there for 16 hours straight, watching as the medical team fought to stabilize him. Elia sat at her feet, holding her mother's hand and humming softly. When the doctors finally emerged, they looked exhausted but relieved. He will live, the chief doctor said, but he needs rest. A lot of rest. His body has been through too much. Thalara simply nodded and walked into the medical bay. She pulled a chair next to Hyun's bed and sat down. Elia climbed up beside her. They would wait. However long it took, they would wait. News of what happened spread across the galaxy faster than light-speed communication. The story of a human cargo worker who had risked his life twice to save others became something more than news. It became legend. Every species had their own version of the tale, but the core remained the same. Kang Hyun had chosen others over himself again and again. The Kreth Dominion fell into political chaos. Vexoran's plot had been exposed and his own people turned against him. The warrior code of the Kreth valued strength, but it also valued honor. Attempting to murder civilians with bombs was not honorable. Vexoran was arrested and imprisoned by his own kind, desperate to avoid a war with the Vellani and their growing list of allies. Humans across the galaxy suddenly found themselves treated with new respect. If one human could be so brave, perhaps all humans had that potential. Doors that had been closed to human traders and diplomats began to open. Opportunities that had seemed impossible became possible, and Kang Hyun, the man who had started it all, slept peacefully in his medical bed, unaware of the changes he had caused. He woke 4 days later to familiar sounds. Elia was humming her favorite song, the one about crystal mountains and singing winds. Thalara was reading something on a datapad, her crystalline features soft in the gentle light. "You keep making a habit of this," Thalara said without looking up. "Waking up in medical bays after nearly dying." "Sorry," Hyun's voice was rough and quiet. "I'll try to stop." Thalara looked at him then and he saw tears forming in her glowing eyes. "You had better. My heart cannot survive losing you again." Elia launched herself at Hyun, carefully avoiding his bandaged areas but wrapping her small arms around his neck. She made her musical sounds of joy and relief, mixed with what might have been scolding. Hyun thought she was telling him he was foolish and brave in hers. Over the next week, as Hyun slowly recovered, the station held a series of ceremonies. Representatives from dozens of species came to honor the human who had saved them all. Some brought gifts. Others brought offers of friendship and trade. Hyun accepted them all with humble gratitude, still not quite understanding why everyone made such a big deal of his actions. "You really do not see it, do you?" Thalara asked him one evening as they sat together in his medical room. Elia had finally fallen asleep after another long day of refusing to leave Hyun's side. "See what? Your own worth, your own courage." Thalara stood and walked to the window, looking out at the stars. Most beings spend their entire lives thinking only of themselves. Survival, comfort, success. These are normal goals. But you, Kang Hyun, you think of others first, not because you were trained to, not because your religion demands it, not because you seek glory. You do it because it is simply who you are. Hyun did not know what to say to that. Thalara turned to face him, and her expression was serious. "Among my people there are 2 sacred bonds. You know of Kareshival, the bond of life, debt, and honor. But there is another bond, one that is rarer and more precious." She walked back to his bedside and knelt so their eyes were level. "It is called Tharasin, the choosing of a life companion. Not bound by debt or duty, but by choice and respect and shared spirit." Her voice was soft but steady. "I have thought about this carefully. I have meditated and consulted the old texts. I have watched you with Alia, listened to your stories, learned your heart." Hyun's own heart was beating faster now. "You are not like anyone I have ever known," Thalara continued. "You see a child in danger and you shield her with your body. You see a bomb that could kill thousands and you carry it away without hesitation. You wake from near death and ask if others are safe before asking about yourself. This is not ordinary courage. This is the courage of someone who understands what truly matters." She reached out and took his hand in hers. Her crystalline skin was cool and smooth against his scarred human flesh. "I am asking you, Kang Hyun, not as a diplomat or a Villani or a mother, but as Thalara. Will you accept Tharasan? Will you choose me as I choose you? Will you be not just Alia's shield father, but my life companion?" The room was silent except for Alia's soft breathing and the quiet hum of medical equipment. Hyun looked at this incredible woman who had come into his life like a storm of crystal and determination. He thought about the past weeks, about learning to live with others after years of loneliness, about Alia's laughter and Thalara's stories and the strange sense of home he had found in their company. "I'm still just a cargo worker," he said quietly. "I don't know your customs perfectly. I'll make mistakes. I'm not brave or special or any of the things people are saying about me." "I know," Thalara said, smiling. "That is why I choose you. Because you are genuine. Because you are kind. Because when the universe tested you, you did not think of glory or reward. You simply did what was right." Hyun squeezed her hand gently. "Then yes, I choose you too. Both of you. If you'll have me." Thalara's smile grew radiant. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. A Villani gesture of deep affection and trust. "We already have you. You became ours the moment you threw yourself over Alia. Everything since then has just been making it official." Alia stirred in her sleep and made a happy sound, as if she could sense the change even in her dreams. 3 months later, the station held another ceremony. This one was different. It was a Villani bonding ceremony, adapted to include human elements. Hundreds attended, representing dozens of species. Humans and Villani stood side by side as equals, something that would have been impossible before Hyun's actions. Hyun wore formal clothes that felt strange on his body, but Thalara had assured him he looked handsome. She wore traditional Villani ceremonial robes that shifted colors like living rainbows. Alia stood between them, holding both their hands and practically vibrating with excitement. The ceremony was beautiful and strange and perfect. When it was done, Kang Hyun was no longer just a cargo worker from Earth. He was Tharasen to Thalara of the Villani Third House. He was shield father to Alia. He was the first human to be granted full Villani citizenship. He was a symbol of what different species could become when they chose understanding over fear. But more than all of that, he was simply Hyun, a man who had a family now. A man who had found his place in the universe. That night, the three of them stood at an observation deck watching ships come and go. Hyun pointed out Earth constellations to Alia, while Thalara rested her head on his shoulder. It was a simple moment, quiet and peaceful. "What happens now?" Hyun asked softly. Thalara was quiet for a moment before answering. "Now we live. I continue my diplomatic work, but with you beside me. Alia grows up knowing that family is not about biology or species. It is about who stands beside you when everything falls apart. And you, my brave human, you help me build bridges between our peoples." "That sounds nice," Hyun said, "but also complicated." "Everything worth doing is complicated," Thalara replied. She took his hand in hers. "But we face it together. That is what Tharasan means. Together." Alia made a sleepy sound and leaned against Hyun's side. He wrapped his arm around her small shoulders and felt a contentment he had never known before. Below them, Station Harmony 7 glowed with thousands of lights, each one representing a different life, a different story. Ships from 100 worlds came and went, carrying goods and people and dreams across the stars. And in one small section of the station, a memorial garden had been planted where the cargo bay had once stood. The plaque was simple. "Here, an ordinary human did an extraordinary thing. May we all find such courage when the moment calls." But Kang Hyun knew the truth. He was not extraordinary. He had simply chosen to act when action was needed. He had chosen kindness over fear. He had chosen others over himself, and somehow in return the universe had given him everything he never knew he needed. A family, a purpose, a home among the stars. The galaxy had always measured strength in weapons and territory and power. But three souls standing together in the observation deck knew better. True strength was measured in gentler ways, in the willingness to shield the vulnerable, in the courage to be vulnerable yourself, in the wisdom to choose love over fear. Hyun had saved a child with his body. In return, he had gained a universe, not through conquest or force, but through the simple act of being kind when kindness was needed most. And that, Thalara thought as she held her human companion close, was the greatest strength of all.